I'll introduce myself as Andrew Smith and welcome everybody to the developer workshop today. Just want to start off with a few words about Tezos, and we know there's a lot of protocols out there that you can choose to build on, but there's some unique things about Tezos that that are interesting about the platform. These will not come into play as you go about making your applications, but it's important to note that the governance platform that's built into Tezos we have this robust and proven upgrade mechanism. We've already pushed 2 major governance changes out into the network. And you think, what's the takeaway for me as a developer? I think that the point is, with that governance mechanism, you're talking about a platform and a protocol that is built for the long haul, that takes into account the evolution of a platform, and it is self-upgradable and amendable. So that's important when you think about the longevity of your solutions. And then another interesting piece is the smart contracts written for Tezos. The Mikkelsen language facilitates formal verification. And we all know from experience that when you put real money at risk and in play with these applications, if there are bugs, if there are problems, it can be catastrophic. And that formal verification is really a way for you to mathematically prove, well, you don't have to do it, the platform will do it, prove that your contracts match your specification. And again, these are things that you get for free. This comes with the platform. It's not something you have to learn. Just be aware that by pushing your solutions on Tezos, this is the support the platform gives you. I did want to mention quickly a couple of ongoing efforts around learning the platform. There is a Blockstars program being put on by B9 Lab. So check out tezos.b9lab.com. I know there's going to be a follow-up email with some of this information, but they have some initial free courseware there, and then a full sponsored curriculum that you can use to learn. And there's also the Tezos Capstone project, which is community-generated curriculum, another really good resource. And obviously the community. The community is very responsive, ready to help, and engaged. And no matter what your language or developer experience is, one thing you hear when we hear about Tezos is the implementation language, the functional nature, OCaml. That doesn't mean that your solutions have to be coded that way. Your smart contracts can be supported by, there's all kinds of different DSLs that will compile down to Mikkelsen, and we'll get into that. Another mention, if you actually get through this hackathon and build your application, get to the finish line, and do it on Tezos, we know there's some good prizes out there, but we're also going to guarantee a prize for anybody who gets to that finish line on the Tezos platform. So having said that, we've got 2 great presenters for you today. Matej is going to walk us through a Hello World tutorial, right? Just what's the essential complexity of getting a contract deployed to the chain. And then Vishakh is going to take it and walk us through a few different trailheads, right? Are you going to build a web application? Are you thinking mobile? Do you want to do something around visualization? And so that will be more about how to take your baseline knowledge that Matej is going to give it and convert that into an application development path. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Matej.
Thanks, Andrew. Nice introduction to Tezos. So I'm going to follow up on what you said. As you mentioned before, Tezos is a blockchain platform. It's a platform that also supports smart contracts. And that's what I'm going to be talking about right now. So another interesting features of the platform are that the protocol itself can be amended, which unlike on Ethereum or Bitcoin is not possible. So you usually end up with hard forks. On Tezos, this is not the case. There's a process for amending the protocol, which means that anyone can propose changes to the protocol. There's, I think, a 4-month period where the protocol can be amended. Right now, we have already done one amendment on the mainnet, and the second one is pending at the moment and has been injected recently. So that's an interesting and unique feature about Tezos. And I believe it's one of the first platforms that has those sorts of features. Another distinctive feature of Tezos is that it's a proof of stake network. Unlike, again, Ethereum or Bitcoin, which are proof of work, Tezos is proof of stake. That means that instead of miners, as you would have on Ethereum, we have people who are called bakers. So those are people who put up a stake, as in proof of stake you would normally do. And then based on their stake, they're assigned roles, and based on those, a person who will bake a new block is picked. So there's a fairly large community of bakers. I think on the mainnet, it's around 400 individual people or individual organizations who bake Tezos. And those are in charge of basically creating new blogs, etc. So that would be about bakers. Another interesting feature of Tezos, at least for me, is that all the tooling around it and the protocol itself is implemented in OCaml, right? And as Andrew has mentioned, there's a huge inclination towards formal verification. So this gives you and me sort of security that your software works as it should, which is really important with blockchain applications and contracts. When saying that it's implemented in OCaml, there's a sister of OCaml called ReasonML, and that's a flavor that could be aspiring for JavaScript devs. So if you're a JavaScript developer and you would like to get into OCaml and into protocol development for Tezos, ReasonML is also a thing to look at. As I've mentioned, there's 400 bakers on the mainnet. We also have different networks. We have mainnet, we have AlphaNet for testing, and we also have ZeroNet. And if you'd like, you can run your own local network, which is called basically the sandbox environment. So we can move on to how you can work with contracts. What do you need to implement the contract, and what do you need to test the contract? So to start with contract development, let's talk about some basics of the protocol. On any blockchain, you usually have a wallet or an account or an address. On Tezos, you have the same, and this address is called an implicit address. It's a simple account from which you can send money or send money to. And then you have another type of account, which is called the originated account. And the only difference is, or the major difference is, that originated accounts can carry code and can store values on the chain. So that would be helpful for our smart contract case. Also, let's talk about what a smart contract is, so we can relate it to Tezos. Smart contract is an app or a piece of code that lives on the chain, right?
Matej, sorry to interrupt. I just want to make sure that you're not speaking to slides, because in the
no, I'm not sharing. I'm not sharing any slides now.
All right, just making sure.
All right. So smart contract, right? So smart contract is a piece of code that lives on the chain, is executed on the chain, and stores its data on the chain. In Tezos, if you want to implement a smart contract, you would have to learn a smart contract language first. A native language to the Tezos platform is called Michelson. Michelson is a low-level stack-based language, so you could say it's similar to languages like assembly. However, this is maybe not ideal for beginners or newcomers, so we have also high-level alternatives with easier syntaxes. So for example, you can write your contract in a Python-like language or in a language that is similar to Pascal, which is called Lego. And we'll take a look at Lego later down in our presentation. So couple of basic things about contracts. So when you want to deploy a contract on Tezos, we call it an origination because of the originated account. If you want to execute a smart contract, you do that by sending a transaction to the contract. which is similar to other blockchain platforms. So couple of tools that you can use for contract development. So I've already mentioned Lego, which is a smart contract language. I'll show you a piece of code later as well. Another tool that you can use is called Granary, which is a tool that gives you a sandbox network. So something like Truffle for Ethereum. So that will be Granary for Tezos. It gives you a sandbox node where you can play around. You don't have to wait for a long block time on AlphaNet or etc. And yeah, so that would be it. So I can show you a piece of a contract right now. So I'm going to share my screen real quick. Can you guys see my screen, Andrew?
Yes, we see it now. Thanks.
Okay, all right. So what we're looking at here is a legal smart contract, and we'll walk through what the contract does and what's the structure kinda. So let's start by taking a look at what we call the storage. So in Tezos, when you have a contract, it has a storage, it has a code, and it has a parameter that it accepts. So in our case, we first define the storage, which is a record of a certain type. And we also define the parameter that it accepts, which is down here. And in our case, it's a natural number. And as a result of the contract of the code execution that we see here, at the bottom is going to be a list of operations that we want to send. So that could be new transactions or new originations or whatever we want, and a new storage value. Our contract is pretty simple. It has a one function called buy taco. It's part of a tutorial series which you can find at the LegalLang website. I believe we'll be sharing some links later. All it does is it accepts a number of the taco kind that you want to buy. So it's basically your order, right? And along with that, you have to send some theses and tokens. And then the contract takes a look. It computes which taco you want to buy. It computes the price, which is the purchase price. Then it compares that if you send enough money to the contract or no. If you didn't, it fails. If you did, then it moves forward. It decreases the stock of the tacos available, and it decreases the storage. That's it. Then I believe it sends the amount that you've sent to the contract as the payment to the owner of the contract, which is the person who runs the taco shop, and the contract basically ends by submitting that back to the blockchain. So that would be the example contract. You can find it again in the tutorial. The trick now is, as I've mentioned before, the native language to Tezos is Michelson, not Lego, which you see up here. So in order to actually deploy the contract, we would have to compile it, and how to compile the contract, you can find it in the tutorial. And this would basically be the Michelson output. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Another thing to also to understand about how contracts work are the different kinds of fees and payments you have to pay on the network itself. So the three main things would be burns, fees, and gas. Burns are basically a fee that you pay for data that you store on the network. Fees are fees that go to the bakers themselves for including your transactions. And gas is related to the fee and also related to the execution of your contract. So similar to what you have on Ethereum. So I think that would be it for the contract part, and maybe I can hand it over to Vishakh, and he will show you more about how to build apps on top of the contract.
Hey, thanks, Matej. Thank you very much. Let me pull up my agenda and my site. So my name is Vishakh. I work for a company called Cryptonomic, and we've been working on Tezos for the past year, trying to make it an accessible and easy platform to build on. So this year is really exciting in the Tezos world. So I'm hoping a lot of you join this hackathon and kind of join us in this effort. So if you go to our site, you'll see some links to some of the tools that I'm going to talk about today. So the first one is a wallet for Tezos called Galleon. And if you go to gallionwallet.tech, you get links, release notes, all of that. But the reason I wanted to bring it up today is, let's say you kind of do some of the stuff that Matej did. You prototype a smart contract, you test it locally. Now you want to productionize it. So one option we have is to actually issue and interact with smart contracts straight out of the wallet. So let's just go over a quick example. I have my wallet already open. As you can see, I have some fake Tezos over here from a testnet, and I'm going to deploy a new contract.
If you're, hey, this is just a heads up. If you're sharing your screen, we only see you right now, but we're not seeing your screen.
Oh, I'm really sorry.
All good.
Do you guys see it now?
Yep, now we see it.
Excellent. So to review, this was the agenda, and this is our site, cryptonomic.tech, where you can see some of these tools I'm going to talk about. Galleon is the wallet that I was talking about. And then, here is the wallet itself. Here's a fake test that I talked about. And now I'm going to deploy a smart contract. So I have some code lying around. If you look at Matej's tutorial later on, the contract I'm using is very, very similar. So I'm just going to copy some of this text. It might look a little bit cryptic to you right now, but once you look at our links, it's going to start making a lot of sense. So let's see, my brackets are balanced. Let's copy this bit also. So this represents the code of your smart contract. This bit represents the initial storage. So this contract, what it does is it simply stores a string, and then you can ask it to update the string that it stores. So it's a very basic contract. I'm just going to put some arbitrarily high number over here, just so we don't have a failure during our demo. Let's use a high fee. And I hit deploy. So that just deployed my contract. We'll give it about 30 seconds to a minute. That's typically how long on a Tezos network it takes for your contract to show up. So just a quick note while that's baked or mined. The code might look a little bit cryptic to you right now. It's in this stack-based language that Matej described called Michelson. But there are many languages available for Tezos for development, so check them all out, see what you like. I'm going to show you guys another one at the end of this presentation. Let's see if our contract made it. All right, so this is the origination that we just did. So we have a little bug in our dev environment right now, but you can see that this was the storage and this was the script that was put in that contract. And indeed, here's the contract that we just originated. I'm going to copy its address, look it up over here, and it shows up. So this, by the way, is a lightweight block explorer that we put out called Arronax. And it's similar to block explorers for any other blockchain, but it's got a retro look. And you can examine the code and the storage of your smart contract. Just disregard this unparsable code bit. It's just a temporary bug. We'll fix it. So the next step is for us to actually invoke the smart contract. Right now, it stores a string called hello. We want to change it to world. So let's go back to our wallet. So this is the address of the smart contract that we want to play with. I'm going to go back to my original address, and then I'm going to click on interact again. And here's the contract I'm invoking. I'm going to invoke it from this other account where I have a lot of money. Let's copy the parameters that I want. There we go. Once again, setting really high numbers so we don't have an issue during this demo. Set a high fee because you guys are very important. All right, so we'll give it another little bit. Yeah, and you know, if you're working with smart contracts, Granary is a great place to start building your contracts, prototyping them. Often, especially if you're tackling a usage or an onboarding use case, if you need a UI where users can just quickly get up and running with some Tezos and interact with your application, then you can do it through the wallet. The other option, of course, is to build a full-fledged DApp, and I'll show you that in a second. So let's see whether this came through. All right, it came through. So yeah, we send the string world to this smart contract. Let's check what's in the smart contract. And indeed, earlier the smart contract stored a string called hello. Now it stores a string called world. So, you know, living, breathing smart contract on the Tezos blockchain. So you guys saw Mininex, which is a quick and dirty block explorer. You saw Galleon from where we issued these smart contracts. So how does Galleon actually do it? How does Galleon actually interact with the blockchain? Like not only pushing transactions, but also reading data off it. So for that, we have an open source tool called ConseilJS. Oh, what's going on here? Zoom's being a little bit difficult. There we go, old-fashioned keyboard shortcuts. So ConseilJS is a client-side library for building decentralized applications. So it lets you do everything that you need to read and write from the Tezos blockchain. So some of you might be familiar with Web3.js. In many ways, this is very similar, except it's written in a functional manner in TypeScript. And if you go on GitHub and scroll down a little bit, there's a link to the documentation. And it kind of tells you how to use it with NPM as a node project. You can use it as a standalone JavaScript file. There's some high-level information on how to get started, on how to create a project, get a brand new account of your own, a faucet account, and then how to deploy and invoke a contract. So one side note, or one very important side note is, we work really hard, so the rest of the people in the Tezos ecosystem, they can take it easy. So if you're new to the ecosystem, or maybe you're just new to blockchains in general, you don't have to struggle, right? Like blockchains are still very new. It takes some time to get used to them. So we run infrastructure. We run Conseil and Tezos and all of that. So you don't have to spend all this time getting started. Like you can go straight into building a DApp and you don't have to deal with the infrastructure. So on the chat group that's set up for this hackathon, if you ping us, we can get you an API key for all of this infrastructure, for the blockchain node, for the other stuff that I'm going to show you. And we'll give you the addresses that you need to hit. Basically, if you don't want to, there should be no reason that you sync a full blockchain. There should be no reason why you bring up infrastructure of your own. You should just focus on, you know, what you're good at. So you guys are the superstars. We work hard to facilitate you. So the thing we just did with the wallet, right? If you just scroll down on this page, it shows you how to deploy your contract. So there's not a lot of time today, so I'm not going to get into the details, but you can see that there's a single function you call, and it accepts some code, some storage, and it deploys it. Likewise, there's code for invoking a contract. So you can take a snippet like this, put it in your app or whatever, and it'll work nicely. So the next thing I want to show you guys is Arronax. Once again, I have to use my keyboard. Very good. So Arronax is an analytics tool focused on the Tezos blockchain right now. So you will need to understand a little bit about Tezos to fully be able to use this tool. But let's run some simple queries. So I want to find the most expensive transactions ever on the Tezos blockchain. So already okay, Zoom is a little bit annoying. There we go. Yeah, already we're set to look at only transactions, and we're gonna look at only successful transactions. Hit apply, sort by amount. And you can see that the most expensive transaction ever made on Tezos was on July the 1st last year, where apparently 32 million Tez were moved. And then as we go down, the amounts get smaller, but you can see some really high value transfers with very low fees happening. Similarly, we can find the accounts with the most money. I'm just going to get rid of the defaults, sort by balance, and we have some really rich Tezos accounts in here. So the point of me showing you this is to show you that there are really good avenues for getting Tezos blockchain data. Everything that you see in this UI, you can also do programmatically, which means pulling information about accounts, operations, anything from the Tezos blockchain. It's really easy. I'll show you a bit more how it works on the back end. Also, if you're doing data visualizations, if you're trying to get insights from the Tezos blockchain, this tool can help you prototype your queries, and then you can take the code and embed it in your application. So let me do one more thing with Arronax. I want to see which account has been doing, or which account is delegated to the most, or which accounts are delegated to the most. Whoops, wrong thing. So I'm just going to look for delegate and address. I encourage everyone to play around with this. Like, I'm going really fast, but if you just play with this tool, ask some questions, I think it'll become clear to you. And then we run an aggregation. So we do a count on address. So let me sort it. There's a bunch of accounts which are undelegated, but 1,518 accounts are delegating to this guy. And we can find out more. There's other sites which tell you for an address which organization they are. But you can also run aggregations, which means you have a lot of power on the kind of Tezos data that you pull out. So that's Arronax. Please play around a little bit. You'll get a nicer sense of how it works. So what is keeping Arronax ticking? Well, that's another project called Conseil. So Conseil is a query API for decentralized platforms. What it means is Conseil caches or indexes all the blockchain data from Tezos and then offers an API with which you can query it out. So that's what Arronax uses. So there's some documentation for Conseil as well. There's a usage page which looks pretty sparse, but it's got a link to documentation. In the interest of time, I'm just going to show very quickly how Conseil works. So I'm going to look at our, so this is Postman. Postman is a standard tool for working with APIs. So let's look at our Conseil production node. So Conseil offers you, can I move this? Oh, nice, I didn't know that. So Conseil offers you some easy routes to get basic information, like the latest block from the Tezos blockchain. You can stick in a transaction ID or an operation ID, and you can get information about it. Conseil is a self-documenting API, so you can actually ask any Conseil instance which platforms it supports. So obviously it supports Tezos. You can ask any Conseil instance which networks it supports. So this one supports mainnet, others support AlphaNet, ZeroNet, and so on and so forth. So you can get a lot, you can ask Conseil about the kind of information that it shows. So this gives you a list of unique protocols that Conseil knows about, for example. You can also run data queries. So you can ask it for all Tezos blocks. You can ask it for all Tezos blocks outside of the range 100 to 200. So I'm saying level between 100 and 200, and I'm inverting it. So if I hit this button, I get back a whole bunch of blocks. Similarly, you can get the top 10 accounts. Oh, maybe I need to fix my query. But anyway, you can get things like top 10 accounts delegating to a specific baker and so on. So Arronax is actually a really useful tool for you to get Conseil queries. So Conseil you can talk to using curl, you can talk to it using Postman, and you can talk to it by embedding the HTTP queries in your application. So here are some examples. Feel free to play with them. If you have any issues, contact us on the chat group, and we shall help you out. Now, I wonder if I can move this. All right, use the keyboard. So if you're trying to find out the best way to run a query, you can first run it in Arronax. So this account query that we just ran. Using your browser, you can kind of run this query using the developer tools, and it tells you, the URL that it's hitting. Sorry, it tells you the URL that it's hitting over here, and you can look at the payload. So this is the payload that you can use with curl or your favorite HTTP library, and you get the data out. And if you're not super technical and you just want to pull some data out, you don't have to bother with any of this. You can just use Arronax to pull data out, load it into your favorite visualization tool, and then enjoy yourselves. So going back to ConseilJS for a second, ConseilJS also lets you talk to Conseil. So if you're building a web app, you don't have to really know much about Conseil. You can just use ConseilJS. So in ConseilJS, in the tutorial, there are some snippets of code which show you how to pull out blockchain data. So for example, over here, we're listing out all transactions for an address. And what we do is we progressively build a query that we want. We build a second query that we want progressively. And we just send it, we use this library function in ConseilJS to pull the data out. So I was gonna go over some ConseilJS examples, but I think we're running really short on time. So what I'll do is, so I have a little mock application over here called Arronax, which is a single page block explorer written in HTML, JavaScript using ConseilJS. And it's just really basic code. It shows you how to make basic queries, for a given account ID is fetching information and so on. But I'll probably pass on the links to the organizers so they can pass it on to you. It's a really useful little application for getting acquainted with the ConseilJS library. I just quickly want to show you a couple of third-party tools. SmartPy is yet another language option for Tezos. Let me just open the online editor. So they have an online editor. Every day it gets a little bit more advanced, more useful. So you can write Tezos contracts in a Python-like language, which I know a lot of people like. And then you can play around and prototype the contract right here. And it supports multiple views and all of that. And there's also TezosKit, which is written by our good friend, Mr. Kiefer Taylor. And this is a library for iOS in case for the onboarding use case, if you guys want to build a mobile app on for iOS, then this is a great library. It interacts with Conseil, so this also lets you pull all the data that I just showed you guys. So just going back to review, if we look at the use cases, if you're building a web-based app with React or Angular or whatever, then ConseilJS should be very helpful to you guys. It should have everything you need. If you're doing a mobile app and you're using something like React Native, then you can use ConseilJS again. If you're doing it for iOS, TezosKit is a great library. For Android, I know there are libraries out there. Unfortunately, we haven't really tested and vetted them yet, but I know if you Google around, you'll find something. So if you're building a mobile app, you have several good options. And then if you're trying to do data visualizations, or if you're just trying to get intelligence about the network, ConseilJS, of course, if you're familiar with JavaScript, you can use ConseilJS, pull the data out yourself. On the other hand, if you don't want to write code, you can just use Arronax along with your favorite third-party tool, whether it's Excel or Jupyter or whatever. You can just load it in there and play with it. So that's everything in a nutshell. I just want to reiterate that there should be a minimum of friction. Like, you guys should not, if possible, you guys should not worry about infrastructure. Just get started with the tools that Matej showed you, the ones that I showed you. There's other brilliant tools for Tezos. Just get started, up and running. Don't worry about the low-level stuff. And we're all very eager to make your hackathon successful. We're available in multiple time zones and very happy to help you guys. So that's all from me. I guess I'll pass it back for Q&A.
Sure. Well, thanks, Vishakh. Just wanted to do a quick recap. Obviously, from the presentation there is a lot of depth to the tools and the libraries that are available when you're building on Tezos. And depending on where you are in your journey as a blockchain developer, you'll either zero in on one of those knowing you need it right now, or maybe you're feeling a little overwhelmed. So I'd say that, let's just distill down for those of you who are just starting and putting your toe in the water here. AlphaNet is your playground. When you get started with Tezos, that's where you want to explore. You can't really make a mistake there. Your path to your first hello world is to activate a wallet after getting some Tez from the faucet, pick one of the DSLs, write a smart contract, deploy that contract to the AlphaNet, find it in a block explorer like Arronax, interact with it, and then find it again and see your changes. I think just doing that will give you the sort of confidence and the motivation to move even deeper into this, this very rich ecosystem. Okay, Gavin, are we opening up for audio questions, or is it strictly chat-based?
So it's strictly chat-based. So as people have questions here, we've got 24, it looks like, still listening. So feel free to add them in here, and let's use this time for open Q&A to get people kicked off, and let's answer anything hard so you guys can get building as needed. I guess that was a pretty thorough walkthrough. Not a lot of questions coming in. That was actually great.
Yeah, I guess that's a good sign. And like we said, there will be a collection of links and tutorials that will make their way to all the participants.
Yeah, also speaking as someone who is usually a little bit shy about talking to a large recorded group, I'm sure there's going to be a chat after this, and yeah, feel free to reach out there.
One thing we didn't mention was the channels where people can find us to talk with us. I think the baking Slack is one of those points, or the Telegram groups, or the Rio chat, right? So if you'd like to talk to us about any of the topics mentioned, feel free to join there and talk.
Looks like we got a couple questions, one from John and another one from Alana.
Yeah, so for John's question, there have been people who have been trying to get nodes running on Raspberry Pis in the past. Some people have had success. You might even find a couple of GitHub repositories that that have configurations for deploying, but I don't think there's anything good or standardized right now. There's a great opportunity because it's, you know, running any blockchain client on a Raspberry Pi, it has so many payoffs. So if you just Google around, you'll find all the existing efforts, and then, you know, there's tremendous room for improvement over there.
All right, we also have one from Alana.
Yeah, so I used to work in finance before this, and that's actually one of the things that really drew me to Tezos. Just years and years of dealing with really mission critical, high notional financial contracts and getting them working without fault. So one thing that's really appealing to me and my colleagues or other colleagues who came from the world of finance is just taking basic financial contracts, options, futures, simple derivatives, and just modeling them on the Tezos blockchain. You know, for extra points, if you want to try to do anything that's related to formal verification, that would be great too. Another direction that you can take in fintech away from actual trading is on the banking side. So one of the big opportunities that people see in the blockchain world, you know, which is underway, a lot of people are thinking about it, is being able to provide banking-like services in areas of the world where banking is not so easily available. So the so-called banking the unbanked challenge. So I know there's a lot of interest in the Tezos ecosystem to get that working. So that's another plan of attack. And then the third direction for you would be the staking economy. So Tezos was the very first major blockchain that went out with large-scale staking with lots of people participating in the ecosystem. And that's very that's very familiar to people from the world of fintech and finance. So if you try to understand how staking works, the economics of it, how people are doing it, how to get more people involved, that would also be a great use case for this hackathon for Alana.
Yeah, and then Alana, I would also add on the, you know, obviously the protocol is a generic blockchain protocol and supports pretty much any use case that you can dream up. But it seems to really be finding a home with, as Vishakh was mentioning, these high notional value contracts, and specifically in the tokenization of assets. So there have been a couple of announcements recently through the cooperation with BTG Pactual and the Elevated Returns project, where you're talking about billions of dollars of real estate that's being tokenized using the Tezos platform to do that. And I think it just speaks again to the trust and the solid foundation that you'll find here.
We also have a question from Eugene, and he's asking, so how does the Tezos voting works, and how can he inject his own proposal? The answer is that to inject the proposal, you have to be a baker, and to become a baker, you need to set up your baking software, and you need to create a deposit. Right now, I believe it's 8,000 Tezos. And once you have done that, you can inject proposals, and you can also vote for proposals in the voting periods.
There's also a question from Yitong Kwa, and it's about not having programming language. My advice would be slightly biased, but get on Arronax. Generally learn about Tezos a little bit, get on Arronax, play around, use that to understand exactly how Tezos works. And then if you have an idea, I'm sure there's going to be developers that are searching for ideas to work on, and someone who kind of has a strong vision for a product that they want to build. And sometimes it's an advantage not to be super technical, because the biggest challenge right now in blockchain land is getting people onboarded and quickly up and running with the decentralized applications. So if you're coming from a non-technical standpoint, like you have a different vision to everyone else, and if you have some nice ideas, I'm sure you can find other people that are happy to help you realize that vision. Yeah, I think, so Eugene had a question for, yeah, so Eugene, most bakeries, they run very elaborate setups on their own because of the security and the uptime requirements. So they, as I understand it, they mostly work through the command line. So we had plans of building a voting UI into Galleon, but we kind of deprioritize it for now because most bakers are so hands-on and they just prefer to use their own tools.
And there's also a tool called Kiln or Clean for running nodes for bakers and running the baker software as well. And I believe they also have support for voting in the different voting periods.
Sorry, John, I saw your point too late. The questions are not evident. But I hope you can scroll back through the chat and get some additional context.
There's also a question in the QA panel from Brett. He says that he would like to teach classes to people about Tezos. So I think that maybe Andrew can reach out to you after the workshop has ended.
Yeah, thanks, Brett. That's great. We will be in touch. There's a big community effort out there. So
John is asking if there will be any local meetup type events during the hackathon. For example, there's a lot of meetup groups for Tezos around the world. For example, I'm part of a Tezos Vienna meetup group. There's also Tezos London, Tezos Paris, Tezos Berlin, Tezos Rio, or New York or Boston. So it depends on where you are. I mean, there are community members everywhere. And you can usually reach out to them on meetup.com or sites like that.
And there's going to be a specific, obviously those are the local meetups happen all the time. There's going to be a specific hackathon meetup in San Francisco in the coming weeks. And then T-Quorum in Berlin is happening on August 22nd. And that will have a very technical focus.
And also a shameless plug. We're doing a rooftop happy hour on the 12th in Brooklyn. So there's no agenda. We're just a bunch of people getting together on a really nice rooftop, talking about Tezos, eating tacos, and drinking beer and other alcoholic beverages. So if you just want to come and talk in general, you should definitely join us if you're in the Brooklyn or New York City area. Solomon has a question about, is there a slashing for bakers? Are there any risk running as bakers? Well, yeah, there are penalties, right? So first of all, there's a bonding requirement. You have certain baking and endorsement rights, and you have to fulfill them. And if you miss your block, if you do anything that's contrary to the health of the network, then you will get slashed. That applies across the board in all proof-of-stake systems. So Solomon asked, are bakers known to be DDoSed? I cannot personally say. I know there have been attempts in the past to compromise other bakers, but the Tezos network's been running for the past 1 year, and there hasn't been any sort of distributed wide-scale outage. It's been running pretty solidly for the past 1 year. You know, famous last words, but it's been running really smoothly, and maybe down the line there'll be some clever schemes to DDoS the network, but one has not worked so far. Oh, also another shameless plug. Between August the 13th and 15th, there's also very likely going to be a Tezos meetup in San Francisco. So if you guys feel like talking Tezos and hanging out with other Tezos people in San Francisco, stay tuned. I think regarding the question about what happens to the deposit of the Tezos baker, so there's a lot of really excellent articles online about the baking process and the governance process. So one of us can collect all the write-ups and put them together, because it's an elegant system, but if you talk about it and you think about it, you can spend the entire day.
But I would say roughly, just if somebody gets slashed, or I think it gets burned, right? Like storage burns, the network basically consumes it. That's what I would say.
All right. Well, what do you think? Should we give it a minute here, post any last links, and kind of wrap it up?
Yeah, no, and obviously the the community runs 24/7. We are all over the globe, so hop on the chats, the Riot, and your questions will get answered. But we're excited to be part of this hackathon. We think we've got a good story to tell, and we can't wait. We're very excited to see what people build.
Yeah. And it's going to be it's the first one we've seen where we've kind of the structure in terms of building a thing, and then you've got 2 weeks to focus on adoption. I'm looking forward to seeing what shakes out from everybody in terms of how do you test for what you want to build.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually a good point. When it comes to the Adopt-a-thon, do you have any sort of words of encouragement or sort of how that's going to play out in terms of what IDEO is expecting, or how do you transition from a built application to taking it to market?
Yeah, so in terms of that, one of the things that we're going to do, it'll be an online event, but we're going to do a design review mid-session of folks who are building things. So I think there's an application process, but we'll get some design directors from the studio and things like that, and we'll do a little session with the teams who are interested in that. And then we can focus on, we can kind of see, what's the nature of the things that are being built, and then how do you actually want to do them, like what are the mechanisms for getting these into the market, and what are you looking for traction-wise? So it's going to be different with any given protocol and with any given product. So we'll take it from there. But I mean, that's going to be kind of the jazz of this hackathon, is that last 2 weeks to see how people lean into it.
Yeah.
One thing we didn't mention so far is the Tezos Tag Exchange, where people can also ask questions. So I'm just going to post the link to the chat so people can see it.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining this morning. This was really informative and a super great walkthrough of just the tools, the ecosystem, and it's pretty welcoming. It's the waters are warmer than most people think when it comes time to build here. So thanks for the showcase.
Sure. Thank you, Gavin.
Yeah, really nice to see you guys. And thanks everybody who hopped on.